Now, sometimes you will come across a true crime story that makes you ponder what makes someone act in such an evil manner. What is it that makes people snap? And this story is just one of those shocking tales. It really is a disturbing story, and one that changed so many lives in a whim and in the blink of an eye. So it was on the 20th of July 2012 when a mass shooting occurred in Colorado. The shooting occurred in Theatre 9 at the Century 16 multiplex operated by Cinemark Theatres, located in the town centre at Aurora shopping mall, Alameda Avenue, and where the innocent victims stood no chance at all. It took place during a midnight screening of the film The Dark Knight Rises. Now, James Egan Holmes, who was 24 years old, entered the theatre, and after buying a ticket he sat in the front row. After about 20 minutes into the film, he left Theatre 9 through an emergency exit door beside the movie screen, with direct access to the lightly used parking area at the back of the complex. Now, when he left, he propped the door open with a plastic tablecloth holder, and at the time, there were about 400 people inside Theatre 9. Holmes then went to his car, which he had parked near the exit door, changed into protective tactical clothing and retrieved his guns. Then about 30 minutes into the movie, police say around 12:30 a.m, he re-entered the theatre through the exit door, the one he had left propped open, and dressed in black and wearing a gas mask, a load-bearing vest, a ballistic helmet and bullet-resistant leggings, a bullet-resistant throat protector and a groin protector, and wearing tactical gloves, whilst he was listening to techno music through a set of headphones, so that he could not hear anything from people in the theatre, that he was about to take their lives and change everything in the next few seconds. So initially, when people saw him, no one really considered Holmes to be a threat, as some witnesses thought he was just wearing a costume, and others in the audience said he was probably dressed up for the screening. Some believed he was playing a prank, and whilst other witnesses thought he was part of a special effects setup for the film's premiere or a publicity stunt by the studio or theatre management. But this was far more evil and sinister. Holmes then threw one gas canister towards the left side of the theatre, emitting a gas and smoke that partially obscured the audience members' vision and made their throats and their skin itch, and also caused eye irritation. He then fired a 12-gauge Remington 870 Express tactical shotgun, first at the ceiling and then at the audience. And then he fired a Smith & Wesson MP-15 semi-automatic rifle with a 100-round drum magazine, which eventually malfunctioned. Pandemonium followed as people started scrambling to get out, hide under the seat and escape any way they could, as the maniac, Holmes, was indiscriminately firing into the poor audience members. Finally, he fired a 40 caliber Glock 22 Gen 4 handgun and at first shot to the back of the room and then towards people in the aisles. A bullet even passed through the wall and hit 3 people in adjacent Theatre 8, which was screening the same film, and witnesses said the multiplex fire alarm system began sounding soon after the attack began, and staff told people in Theatre 8 to evacuate. Now, during the melee, Holmes had fired 76 shots into the theatre, 6 from the shotgun, 65 from the semi-automatic rifle, and 5 from the .40 caliber handgun, and immediately set off tear gas grenades. And then he started devastatingly shooting into the audience. In the most brutal few moments of carnage, 12 people were killed and 70 were injured. 58 of them from gunfire. The gunfire smoke slowly dissipated, and through all of the smoke and the mist, this was the deadliest shooting by a lone gunman in the history of Colorado, and the state's second deadliest mass shooting, just after the 1999 Columbine High School massacre. At the time, the event had the largest number of victims, 82 in one shooting in modern American history, and this number was later surpassed by the 107 victims of the Orlando nightclub shooting, and eventually the 927 victims of the 2017 Las Vegas shooting. But nevertheless, this act of mass murder still left its deadly and indelible mark in history, and still shocks even to this day. The first phone calls to the emergency services via 911 were made around midnight, and then during the shooting, other victims began to call the police, who arrived within 90 seconds and found 3 .40 caliber handgun magazines, a shotgun and a large drum magazine on the floor of the theatre. Some people reported the shooting via Twitter or text messaging rather than calling the police. Now, officers were already at the theatre by the time that the tweets were sent. Ambulances were hindered by chaos and congestion in the parking lot, and they were unable to reach the back of the complex, where police had pulled the injured out through the emergency exit doors of Theatre 9. Then it was around 12:45 a.m. when police officer Jason Ovia apprehended Holmes behind the cinema next to his car and without any resistance. And because of his tactical clothing, Holmes was at first mistaken for another police officer. Once the police officer realised it was Holmes, he said that he was calm and disconnected during his arrest. Now, 2 federal officials have said that Holmes had dyed his hair red and called himself the Joker, although authorities later declined to confirm this. And 3 days later, at his first court appearance in Centennial, Colorado, Holmes' hair appeared reddish-orange, and later, the Colorado District Attorney who prosecuted Holmes said he never called himself the Joker and blamed the federal officials for the rumour. The officers then later found several firearms in the theatre and inside the shooter's car, including another Glock 22 handgun, and Holmes was also found carrying a first aid kit and spike strips, which he later admitted in an interview that he had planned to use if police either shot at him or chased him. In a sinister twist, Holmes had earlier rigged his apartment, which was about 5 miles north of the cinema, with homemade explosives and incendiary devices. Police arrived on scene and evacuated 5 buildings surrounding the Aurora residence, and then these were subsequently defused by the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office bomb squad, and without any further incident, luckily a day after the shooting. It also transpired that officials had disarmed an explosive device that was wired to the apartment's front door, allowing a remote-controlled robot to enter and disable other explosives. The apartment held more than 30 homemade grenades wired to a control box in the kitchen and filled with at least 30 US gallons of gasoline, so it was going to go off like a bottle of pop had it not been for the swift work by the authorities. A police official said a Batman mask was found in the apartment. Following his arrest, Holmes was initially jailed at the Arapahoe County Detention Center under suicide watch, and then police interviewed more than 200 witnesses of the shooting. Then, in the aftermath and fearing copycat crimes, multiple movie theatres showing the same film across the United States increased their security. And then also all gun sales had suddenly increased in Colorado as people sought to protect themselves. And this also started political debates about gun control in the United States. The shooter, James Holmes, then confessed to the shooting but pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, as Arapahoe County prosecutors were seeking the death penalty. And so the trial began on the 27th of April 2015, and after several weeks and on the 16th of July, Holmes was convicted of 24 counts of first-degree murder, 140 counts of attempted first-degree murder, and 1 count of possessing explosives. Then on the 7th of August, the jury deadlocked on whether to impose the death penalty, and instead Holmes was given 12 life sentences, 1 for every single person he killed, and he also received 3,318 years for the attempted murders of those he wounded and for rigging his apartment with explosives, which would have caused much more carnage and murder, and without any remorse. So this was a devastating incident, cold-blooded and murderous, and only Holmes knows what made him snap, just crushing for everyone caught up in this scene of carnage. Thanks for watching, and it would be great to catch you for the next video. Cheers.